Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I'd like to welcome you to my uh, briefing for Chapter 1 of Django Unleashed by Andrew Pinkham. And we're going to be using this book extensively in our course, and I think it's a great book. It's not a perfect book, but it's a really good book. I like it a lot. Um, let's just go on to chapter one. I'm kind of spinning around here in the electronic version of the book. Let me make the type a little bit bigger. So, this book is really a gigantic tutorial from beginning to end. And in the tutorial, you build a blog, which the users are able to comment on. And it's not completely unlike the Django Girls tutorial that we do in my class just to kick things off in terms of what the case is like. It's a combination of content management and social media, okay, in terms of application. But it's in much more detail. And the book really, I think, does a great job of explaining it step by step, and even goes so far as to show and to demonstrate alternative approaches. And it kind of settles in the end of the chapter always on what I consider to be the best approach. Okay, so compared to the Django Girls tutorial, there's not a lot of magic. You know, the Django Girls tutorial doesn't really talk a lot about why you're doing what you're doing. This book does. It talks a lot more about why you're doing what you're doing, and you can get a really good sense of it. The book comes with a repository that you're able to download of the code, and that's something I'm going to want you to do. So let's just see how to do that. Okay, so in my ebook, there's a link to the repository, so I just click on it. And I come down here, it's on GitHub, so I come down here to the link for clone or download, and I just copy the URL to the clipboard. All right, and I'm going to make a lot of use of source tree. So I'm going to use a source tree as a way to get a local copy of the repository for this book. So I'm using the Mac version of all this. So if you're on Windows, it's a little different, but it should be parallel functionality. So I say new, clone from URL, and I'm just going to paste in the URL. And click on the destination path. It'll fill all that in. And it puts it under my user ID and gives it the name of the book. And that's fine for me. So now I'm just going to clone. Okay. And here's the window with the repository. And I just want to show you that when we get it, the state of the repository is it's at the end of the book. Okay, the last commit was somewhere in chapter 29. All right. Well, are we going to start at the end of the book? No, we're not. So what we're going to do is that we're going to position this repository to just where we are in the book, and that's going to allow us, whenever we want to copy code from the folder that is the repository on our local machine and copy it into the project the PyCharm project that we're using to get this thing to go. Okay? So, for instance, I am going to, and this is the thing that I'm going to recommend from time to time. Chapter 1 is kind of short, so I'm going to say, well, what should this file structure look like when we're done with chapter 1? That's a typical question I'm going to ask. So how do I do that? Well, I go back and I find the last of the commits for chapter 1, and I highlight it, and then I right click on source tree, and then I pick reset master to this commit. And then it gives me a choice of the mode we want to use. And I want to take hard mode. I want it to change the whole repository to make it look exactly like his work at the end of chapter 1. So I'm going to say OK. And now I'm just going to go find that. Directory, which is called Django Unleashed 1.8. I'm going to open it up, and you're going to see it doesn't have a whole lot of files in it at the end of chapter 1. Okay, so that's half of the equation of, to the extent that you're going to follow along with the book, with this grand tutorial. You can type in some of the code. If you type in all the code, it'll take you a lifetime. How do I know this? I tried. Okay. So if you're going to follow along, you're going to have to copy files from this repository from the book, which we're going to leave unchanged except for spinning it from chapter to chapter using the method that I already showed. And then we're going to have another directory, which is our PyCharm project. Okay, so we're not quite ready to create that, but let's go back to the book and talk about that. Okay, so I want you to read this whole chapter. Okay, there's a lot of basics here. For those of you who are going over things that they already know, well, you can do it faster, right? It's not a long chapter. In terms of the tutorial thread, we don't really get to that until pretty much at the end of the chapter. Okay, so we're talking about 1.7.1, generating the project structure. And he has you doing it at the command line. And of course, I don't like to work at the command line unless you twist my arm. So I'm going to recommend that you work with PyCharm, and that you also work with Conda Navigator. So, okay, we're going to need to start a project called SU Organizer. SU stands for startup. That's a special pretentious kind of small company is a startup. Okay, could we have called it a company organizer? Yeah, we could have. If we weren't so pretentious, I think we would have. Okay. So, is this how we start projects with the tool set that we're using in this course? No. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we want to go to Anaconda Navigator, and we want to make sure that we create a virtual environment that's appropriate for a Django project. Okay? So I fired that up. And now I've lost it. So this multi-monitor stuff can be challenging sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to unlose that and I'll be back. Okay, we're back, and I found the Anaconda Navigator app, and I have it in our window. And let's go look at environments. Okay. And right now, I have these environments for a lot of things, but not for this project that we're trying to create that we're going to call SU Organizer. I realize that that's not the name of the repository that we downloaded, but it turns out that the top level directory doesn't have to match. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create an environment, and I always name these E4 for environment for SU Organizer, because that's what we do in the book tutorial. And we let that get rolling along. And we do have a little bit of a chicken and egg problem with whether or not we're going to put Django in our virtual environment. And I've experimented a bit, and even though we're going to be installing a newer version of Django than the book is going to eventually use, we are going to install that here in E4SU Organizer. So we're just going to go to the top and say, show me the not installed, and get down to DJ for Django. Oh, I can search. That's easier, isn't it? Okay, we click that and we say we want to apply. And it finds a pretty recent version, 1.11.8. Apply that. We're eventually going to downgrade Django in this virtual environment, but not yet. So if we go back and look at what is installed, oh, you know what it is? It's installed, but it's only looking at Django, so let's close that. So there's everything, including Django. Very good. So we have the environment that we need. All right. And so now let's crank up PyCharm. And that's coming up on another monitor right now. All right, so I'll pull this over. And we'll look at this. And in PyCharm, we want to create a new project. Okay, it's a Django project. We don't want it called Untitled 1. We want it called SU Organizer. Okay, that's good. And of course, we need to set the interpreter to work with our virtual environment. So we want to go down to existing interpreter, and we don't want the one that they're offering us. So click on the wheel over here for settings, and then click add local. And then here we want to pick Conda environment, and the one it's offering is not the one we want. So go over to the right to the three button, the three dot button, and open that. And find your way to the environment here under the Mac. It's under my user ID. So if I go under my user ID, I'm looking for the folder called Anaconda 3. And then within that, the folder called envs. That's the environment. And I find E4SU Organizer and open that. And then I open under that bin. And now I just want to find the file that is the shortcut to the Python interpreter. And it turns out that's just called Python. Okay, so we say OK. And now we come back and we say OK. And now we come back and we say create. So this should create our project. And again, it's on another monitor. So let me make it a little smaller and bring it down to my laptop. I use my laptop because the graphics are better with the video recording program. Okay. And if you look down at the bottom of the window here, I just saw it when I pulled it in. There was a blue streak that showed that it was still setting up the project. So it's copying in files relating to it being a proper Django project, which is good. That's what we want it to be. One of my tests for whether it really thinks it's the proper Django project is to go up to the menu and click on Tools and see if it has Run Manage.py task. And that shows that we've got something that PyCharm thinks is a Django project, and that's good. It's going to give us all the features that we want. And under the directory that we have right now, we have even fewer files that we saw than what the author had at the end of chapter 1. And that makes sense because we're not at the end of chapter 1. Okay, so let's kind of set things up. I always like to open up a terminal. So again, you can come down here to this lower left and click on this. Or here there's already a terminal to go to. So click on that. And it's under my user ID, and it's under the SU Organizer directory. So that's good. But it's not using our virtual environment. So how do we list the virtual environments? Well, conda env list. Okay, and here's a list of them. And we see E for SU Organizer. And the way that you activate a conda environment in Mac OS is you say source activate and then the name of the environment. It's slightly different on Windows. You'll have to use your cheat sheet. So E for SU Organizer. And there it is right there. And if I say conda list, I'll see the packages installed in our environment. And we've got Python 3.6.4. That's good. And we should have Django 1.11.8. And in chapter 2, we downgrade this, but we haven't gotten there yet. Okay. All right, that looks good. And then the other thing that we want to do is we want to be able to run manage.py. Okay, so to get that manage.py console to open, we go up to the menu at the top, click on Tools, and run manage.py task. Okay, and here it's running manage.py for SU Organizer, just what we want. Okay, and let's go back to the book. What was the book trying to do? Well, it was trying to start the project. Well, we didn't use the command line thing to start the project because we created the project with PyCharm, so that's okay. It wanted us to, once we were inside the project, it wanted us to run a migrate, so it could build some things related to the database. So let's do that. Let's go to manage.py and go to the console and just say we want to migrate. Okay, and okay, that looks like we got the same things to happen there. That looks good. Okay. It wants us to run server and see if we can get the app to run. So let's do that. Go to PyCharm. We still have a perfectly good window here. So run server. We're not going to pick a port. We'll take the default port, which is 8000. So enter. And it said system check, no issues. That's good. And we have the link here. So let's click on the link, and we bring up this thing here that says that it worked. So, oh yeah, we've got a proper project. We don't have much in it, but it's a proper project, and that's where we're supposed to be. Okay, now the code for these Django apps goes in these directories called, well, they're called apps, right? And the way we create them is to do start app. So we need to do a start app for organizer. Okay. And we also need to do a start app for blog. Okay, so there are going to be two apps here. It's kind of overkill, but he wants to show us how to do two apps, so that's okay with me. So again, go back to PyCharm. And, oh, well, we can't really work in our manage.py window because it's being hogged by the development server. That's okay. If we just go down to the bottom here and get the red X, this is the equivalent of hitting Control C. So if we click on that, then that will stop the development server, and now we can go back up to the menu and say Tools, run the Manage Pi task, and now we'll have a proper thing to do. So we want to do a start app on organizer, and we want to do a start app on blog. So let's do that. Start app organizer, enter, and see how we get the directory structure for organizer there. And now we're going to do a start app on blog, start app on blog, and hit enter, and you'll see that blog has popped up here as well. So that's good. All right, that's looking pretty good. So let's go back to the book and see what it's trying to achieve here. Well, it wants us to connect the Django apps in the settings.py file. Now the settings.py is under SU organizer. Okay, so we can do one of two things. One is we can go in the SU organizer directory to settings.py, and we can actually change the file and do save. Okay, the other thing we can do is we can copy this file from the state that it's in at the end of chapter 1. So I think you know how to do the typing. I want to show you how to do the copying. Okay, so again, let's go back and look at our source tree. And where is our repository? Is it at the end of chapter 1? Yes, it is. It has a CH01, and then the next one is a CH02. That's terrific. So we're at the right place. So let's go to our, let's go and look at our file. So what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for the settings.py under the SU organizer directory. Okay, and let's just copy that. So I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go to PyCharm, and I'm going to find the same thing. So I'm going to find the SU organizer directory, and I'm going to right click and just say that I want to paste. And then it's going to say, oh, paste it into settings.py? Yeah, that's fine. And it says it already exists. Do we care? No, overwrite it. Okay, that sounds good. So let's just look at settings.py. Did we get the code that we wanted? Yeah, we did. If we look at installed apps, we see organizer and blog are already there. So this is just a single file that we copied over. It's a very simple chapter, okay? And we've done the kind of things that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to follow along, and we're going to have to type in these commands to manage.py, the ones that change the structure of our project and such, and we did that. And then either we're going to have to type in the code that he shows us, which in this case we could have easily done, or we're going to have to copy over the files that he has shown us in the chapter that he either added or changed. And I've shown you how to do that. So when you get to whatever point you're at, now here this is a pretty short chapter. I just went right to the end. But you can pick a breakpoint within the chapter, spin the repository up to that, and this allows you to follow the tutorial without having to type in all the code. Because really, a lot of us teachers believe that you learn by typing code. And so the idea that he suggests you might want to type this code, I think, is well-founded. But we have our series of assignments we're doing, and there'll be plenty of code typing there for you then. Okay, so type what you want, copy the rest, and save yourself for the series of assignments where there will be a video tutorial to follow, and I will expect you to be doing the typing. Okay, so don't wear out your fingers on the Pinkham book. Okay, so let's just go back to where he was. Okay, I've lost him again. I think I closed the book. I hate that. Oh, there it is. Okay, we changed these. And then he wants to run the development server again. Now, this is the development server, okay, which you run with run server. He's showing us that we can use a port number other than the default. We don't really care to. So we're going to run this again. Okay, so let's go to manage.py and say run server again. And 2 enters. And as long as it says system checked identified no issues, we're fine. Okay? Now, I want to demonstrate something for you here. Every time we add code, every time we change code when we're using the development server, we can simply do a save, and the server will reload it. So if in fact let's say we decide that we want to tell it that we want to use try to find me, we're going to tell it that we want to install that app. Well, that doesn't exist yet. If all we have to do is to click off of that in the editor, and it's saved. And now what's happening? Well, the error is showing up down here in the manage.py window because it reloaded the code, and we have an error on the server. So how could we fix that? Well, let's just get rid of that phony line, okay, and click off of that line, okay. And here's where sometimes I want to do a Command S on my Mac or a Control S on Windows. I want to make sure it's saved, and it looks like it did save. It doesn't clear that. Well, how do I know this server is properly running now? Well, click on the link, and it'll come up and say it's working. When we had that error there, it wouldn't have done this. Okay? So the nice thing about the development server is every time you change and save the code, and in PyCharm, saving is pretty much automatic, the development server senses this and reloads the development server with the new code. So it makes it really nice for change code, test, change code, test. And in fact, we do a lot of that on our first coding assignment that we're going to do that's called the model coding assignment. I've already recorded the tutorial for that, so I know how that goes. So that's it. Is there anything else we need to look at? No, I think that's it. So I've gone through a lot of the mechanics here. I'm not going to go through the mechanics of all this thing on every chapter. You should be able to get yourself to the point where they are in the book in your copy of the project. Okay, now, one more thing to think about. Okay, I'm thinking that it's going to help me, I'm hoping it would help you, to put this under version control. Okay, now it's easy to get confused because we have the repository from the book. If we put this under version control, then we're going to have our own version under version control. Why do I want it under version control? I'd like to be able to back up to some place where I was that I know it worked. Okay? For instance, the end of every chapter. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to look for my project. So my project is in here. It's under my ID and it's under PyCharm projects and it's called SU Organizer. So there's my project right there. And what am I going to do with it? Well, I'm just going to pull it onto source tree, onto the top part of source tree. I'm just going to pull it on there and have it create a local repository. And I tend to, for every time I have a local repository, I tend to make a copy of it up on my remote server. So in my case, it's always at a GitHub. So I'm just going to highlight this SU Organizer project directory, pull it down here. It says it wants to create a repository called SU Organizer. That's good. It's a Git repository. Also create a remote repository. Do you have to do this? No, but it's kind of a backup and I like it. So I'm going to click on that and then I'm going to say create it. Okay. And where am I going to do it? Well, I'm going to do it at Bitbucket. I'm going to put mine at my my Ligent account rather than my UWM account because that's where I've got the rest of this code. So I'm going to say, yeah, create that. And so we have an SU Organizer. And can I move this? Yeah, I can. So I'm going to put that up at the top, actually. So SU Organizer's at the top, Django English is after that. So let me see where I am. And what's interesting is I haven't committed all this stuff yet. Okay, so that makes sense, I guess. So what I want to do is I want to commit it. Okay, and I'm going to say the following. Initial commit end of Pinkham chapter 1, chapter 01. Okay, and I'm going to push it and commit it. So what I like about this is if I get into chapter 2 and I totally foul up my copy of the project, I can always come back and reset it to the last time I know that I like what I had, like the end of chapter 01. So I think I'm going to have end of chapter 01, end of chapter 02. Chapter 03 I might have a couple of breakpoints in, but what I don't want to do is make a terminal mess of the project only to find I don't have any place to back up to. Okay? And I think this will serve you pretty well too. All right. So that's it for chapter 1. A lot of mechanics, but we're not going to repeat that in every chapter. You're on your own with the mechanics from here on in. Thanks. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.